This chapter made me experience a fresh hate for the
Colonial.
colonial government.
Okay. Hello everyone and welcome to Tariq and welcome to our special segment Tariq classes for class 12th history. एंड आज हम थर्ड बुक से शुरुआत करेंगे. थर्ड और आपकी आखिरी बुक है एंड इससे आप मिडीवल इंडिया से ट्रांजिशन करके मॉडर्न इंडिया के अंदर हम जाएंगे. एंड द फर्स्ट चैप्टर इज colonialism and the countryside, exploring official archives. In this chapter, we will get to know about how the British dealt with the countryside, उनके रेवेन्यू पॉलिसीज़ क्या थी लैंड को लेकर, और चाहे वो बंगाल की रेवेन्यू पॉलिसी हो या राजमहल हिल्स में जहाँ पहाड़िया जो संथल्स रहते थे वहाँ क्या पॉलिसीज़ थी, और पेजेंट्री जो थी, जो पेजेंट थे वो किस उनका अब क्या होना था, मतलब इन अ वे बिकॉज मुगल्स डिक्लाइन हो रहे थे और जो ब्रिटिश थे वो अपनी पकड़ जमा रहे थे सब कॉन्टिनेंट में, एंड वो क्या पॉलिसीज़ लेके आए थे. तो काफ़ी चीज़ें बदल गई थी, जो स्ट्रक्चर था उसमें चेंजेस आने लग गए थे. द फर्स्ट टॉपिक इज बंगाल एंड द जमींदार्स. So the establishment of the British rule in the subcontinent started from Bengal. 1797 में there's a place called Bardhaman or Bardhaman in West Bengal. वहाँ पे auctions शुरू हो गई थी estates या महल्स की, जो कि वहाँ के राजा को belong करती थी. परमानेंट सेटलमेंट 1793 में लागू हो गया था. अकॉर्डिंग टू दिस the states had to pay their revenue and if they failed तो उनके स्टेट्स को या महल्स को ऑक्शन कर दिया जाएगा. एंड बिकॉज द राजा हैड एक्यूमुलेटेड लॉट ऑफ एरियर्स, तो उनकी ज़मीनों को, उनके स्टेट्स को ऑक्शन किया जा रहा था. न्यूमरस परचेजर्स केम एंड बिडिंग हुई, बट इसमें एक ट्विस्ट था. ट्विस्ट ये था कि जो परचेजर्स थे इन महल्स के वो राजा के ही सर्वेंट्स थे. सो दे वर बाइंग, परचेजिंग द स्टेट्स ऑफ द महल ऑन हिज बिहाफ. सो 95% जो सेल थी वो फिक्टिशियस थी. इन अ वे सेल तो हुई पर राजा ने ही अपनी ज़मींदारी को बरकरार रखा. परमानेंट सेटलमेंट के बाद 75% जो ज़मींदारी थी वो बदल गई थी. परमानेंट सेटलमेंट लागू करके ब्रिटिश को ये लगा था कि जब वो 70s में व्हेन दे हैड एनेक्स्ड बंगाल, तो वहाँ उस दौरान बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स थी. देयर वाज इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस, फैमिन्स, ड्राउट. Then so they thought कि how to make a change, get a change, कि लोग invest करें, revenue हो, trade है, and you have agriculture land, and so that people invest more in agriculture. So how to get on to that? तो इसलिए permanent settlement लागू किया गया था. रेवेन्यू permanent जब settlement हुआ था तो आपकी जो रेवेन्यू है वो फिक्स हो गई है. इससे क्या होगा कि a lot of money they'll get a lot of money, the colonial जो रूलर्स थे. फिर आप और पैसा इन्वेस्ट कर सकते थे एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप में, या एंटरप्रेन्योर्स भी को काफ़ी पैसा मिल सकता था. एंड इट वाज फिक्स्ड इन परपेचुइटी. सो इफ़ यू वांटेड टू गेट मोर मनी तो ट्रेड वाज टैक्स्ड एंड अदर मीन्स वर टैक्स्ड. They also wanted to create another section, a yeoman section, or the rich landowners that will be providing with the revenue to the colonialist, and also they'll be loyal to them. So the permanent settlement was fixed with the talukdars and the rajas of Bengal. तो अब ये जो राजा थे वो एक जमींदार बन गए थे, और एक जमींदार के अंडर 50 to 60 विलेज आते थे. तो एक जमींदारी would be considered as one estate. तो जो ज़मींदार की ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी कि वो हर एक विलेज से रेवेन्यू कलेक्ट करेगा और वो ब्रिटिश ऑफिशियल्स को देगा, एंड जो डिफरेंस था वो अपनी इनकम के तौर पर रखेगा. एंड इफ़ ही फेल टू गिव द रेवेन्यू regularly, then his estates would be auctioned. But permanent settlement जब शुरू हुई थी तब a lot of zamindars failed to give revenue to the colonialists, because the reason was कि एक तो जो revenue था वो बहुत high था. It was फिक्स एट द मैक्सिमम हाई, बिकॉज उनको लगता था कि अगर बाई चांस हम एक रेवेन्यू फिक्स कर ही रहे हैं तो क्यों ना हम उसको हाई ही फिक्स करें, क्योंकि बाई चांस अगर एग्रीकल्चर एक्सपैंड करता है या और इनकम इंक्रीज होती है तो उनको फ़ायदा नहीं होता अगर वो कम रेट पे फिक्स करते, बट उन्होंने बहुत हाई रेट पे फिक्स किया था। दूसरी इशू ये थी कि 1790s में ये परमानेंट सेटलमेंट लागू हुई थी 1793 में, बट उस टाइम पे द प्राइसेस वर वेरी लो एंड इट वाज वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर द जमींदार टू कलेक्ट रेवेन्यूज फ्रॉम द रियाद एंड गिव इट टू द कंपनी। थर्ड इशू ये था कि रिगार्डलेस कोई भी सिचुएशन हो आपको पंक्चुअली रेवेन्यू देना ही होगा, एंड एक सनसेट लॉ था उस टाइम पे वेयर इफ द जमींदार फेल्ड टू गिव द रेवेन्यू ऑन अ पर्टिकुलर टाइम लाइक इवनिंग के टाइम पे तो एक था तो उनका एस्टेट ऑक्शन कर दी जाएगी। फोर्थ इशू ये था कि जो जमींदार थे उनकी पावर बहुत लिमिटेड हो गई थी अंडर द परमानेंट सेटलमेंट। द कंपनी वांटेड टू in a way have the support of the zamindars but also wanted to control them. They were autonomous rajas, the zamindars, but उनकी वो काफ़ी जो पावर थी वो कंट्रोल करना चाहते थे। पहले तो उनकी जो आर्मी होती थी वो डिसबैंड कर दी गई, कस्टम ड्यूटीज हटा दी गई, उनकी कचहरियाँ होती थी उस पर भी एक कलेक्टर को बिठा दिया गया टू सुपरवाइज इट। सो अ लॉट ऑफ देयर powers were getting limited under the permanent settlement and under the company Raj. The zamindars also lost their power to organize local justice and local police. ये जो सारे जो उनकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज़ होती थी वो कलेक्टोरेट को दे दी गई थी। Many times when the zamindars failed to give the revenue, official was sent to take away his rights completely. Rent collection जो रेंट कलेक्ट करते थे ज़मींदार के लिए वो आमला होते थे जो विलेज टू विलेज जाते थे और रेंट कलेक्ट करते थे। एंड मैनी अ टाइम्स द ज़मींदार डिड हैव द राइट टू प्रोसिक्यूट एनीबडी हु अ डिफ़ॉल्टर, बट होता क्या था कि काफ़ी बार द प्राइसेस वर जो प्राइसेस थे वो लेस थे, मतलब जो क्रॉप्स के प्राइसेस थे या कोई सिचुएशन ऐसी होती थी, कोई ड्राउट होता था, फैमिन होता था कि एग्रीकल्चर सरप्लस में नहीं होती थी, तो और कभी कभी जो रियात थे और स्पेशली रिच हेडमैन जोतेदार्स they also kind of delayed giving the revenue to the zamindars because they wanted to see them suffer. कभी कभार रेंट कलेक्शन इतना मुश्किल होता था और प्रोसिक्यूटर्स को जो डिफ़ॉल्टर्स थे उनको प्रोसिक्यूट करने में भी बहुत टाइम लग जाता था बिकॉज द जुडिशियल प्रोसेस वॉज वेरी लॉन्ग ड्रॉन. कभी कभी 30,000 केसेस पेंडिंग होते थे, स्पेशली 1798 में 30,000 केसेस थे जो एरियाज एक्यूमुलेट हो गए थे, वो केसेस पेंडिंग थे.
अभी हमने एक टर्म का यूज़ सुना जिसको जोटेदार कहते थे. अराउंड दिस टाइम ओनली व्हेन द जमींदार्स वर फेसिंग अ क्राइसिस ऑफ सॉर्ट्स by the 18th century, you could see the rise of a class of people who were called the jotedars, and they held a lot of power in your local village area. Francis Buchanan, who did a lot of survey work for the English East India Company, in his work on particularly in the Najpur district of North Bengal, he gives us a vivid picture of this class of rich peasants and the power that they held, and these rich peasants were called the jotedars. By the early 19th century, jotedars had gathered a lot of land under their sway, which almost added up to being thousands of acres of land was under their control. And not just the land, they also controlled the local trade, money lending activities, even the life of the local peasant was controlled by them. A large portion of the land that was controlled by the jotedars was cultivated by the sharecroppers, and they were locally called the adiyars or the bargadars. And these people, they bought their own plow and they harvested and harvested the land, they collected the crops, and they gave half the share to the jotedar. Jahan ek taraf the zamindars who controlled a vast amount of land and villages, they usually lived in cities and urban spaces. The jotedars, In contrast, even though they held sway over a smaller part of land and they were under the zamindars, but because of the close proximity to the village area, they had a lot of control over the village. And much more so than the zamindars. In fact, there have been instances where the jotedars have yielded so much power that they have, delayed the collection of revenue, or they have protested against the increase of the collection that was supposed to take place. And in fact, even when the lands of the zamindars were being auctioned off, oftentimes you would find jotedars purchasing these lands. So they resisted the efforts of the zamindars to increase the jama or the revenue of the land. They would not let the officials sent by the zamindars to collect revenue or to assess the collection do their job. Oftentimes they would even mobilize the riots to protest against the zamindars, and they would make it very difficult for the zamindar basically to do their job, which was collecting the revenue, even going as far as delaying the payments that the zamindar needed to collect in order to keep his land. Jotedars were a class of rich peasants that were mostly found in northern Bengal, but this doesn't mean that rich peasants that held sway over the land and that were proving to be a force against the zamindars were only found there. You could find them in other places also. It's just that the names differ. So in other places they might be known as the Hauladars or the Gantidars and even Mandals. And the rise of this class of rich peasants inevitably weakened the state of the zamindars. But just because a section of rich peasants was standing up to the zamindar, or they were challenging the position of the zamindar, did not mean that the zamindar lost his or their sway over the land that they held or they governed. In fact, because there was this clause where their zamindari would be auctioned off to keep, and land was power, right? So to keep that power within themselves, they devised various plans and schemes to continue keeping their control over their land. Fictitious sale was one such strategy, and इसका जो prime example है that we can see in the zamindari of Burdwan. पहले तो the Raja of Burdwan उन्होंने अपनी कुछ जमींदारी अपनी मदर के नाम पे कर दी, क्योंकि कंपनी की एक ये पॉलिसी थी कि the land that was owned by women would not be auctioned off, and so some land he handed over to his mother, very chalak, and the other land to safeguard that land from getting auctioned, he planted his agents. There were agents of the zamindar who would infiltrate and try to not let the auction be a success. So if there was a bidder who would bid on the zamindari land, they would bid higher, and so on and so forth till the time the land was given to them. But then when the time came to pay the money that they had bid, they would not. So they would default on that, and then again the land would be put up for auction. Then the agents of the zamindar would go and bid on the land, and they would bid really high amounts that could not be contested by other people. And this kept on going till the time the state was exhausted, and by the time by the end wo haar ke thak ke, they would sell the same zamindari to the initial zamindar for a very less cost.
I tell you, the jugaad system na
ये हम लोग ही कर सकते हैं, ये और कोई नहीं कर सकता.
जुगाड़.
Now, Burdwan was not the only zamindari that participated in this sort of dance of auction between themselves and the company. Between 1793 to 1801, 4 big zamindaris, including Burdwan, participated in what is now known as the Benami purchases. Now, these Benami purchases collectively yielded nearly a sum of rupees 30 lakhs. Which was a huge amount during back then. And of the total auction sales that happened, nearly 15% were fictitious. But Benami purchases were not the only practices through which the zamindar held sway over his land. By chance, if there was a purchase made by a third party who was not of the zamindar, they would be driven away by the lathyal sent by the former zamindar. Oftentimes, even the ryots would not cooperate with a change of hands because they viewed the zamindar as their leader of sorts. They were his subjects, they were his praja, and they revered him. He was a patriarchal figure of sorts, and he could not, and there was also the sense of identity that was associated with the
same
zamindar.
culture.
Same culture tha. It's like you look up to your own leader, right? You somehow connect your identity to him because you have that shared experience. And if the zamindar is displaced, then your identity it feels attacked. So, all in all, it was not easy to displace the zamindar from his zamindari. By the beginning of the 19th century, the depression in prices was over. So, the condition steadily improved. Those who survived the troubles of the 1970s, जो भी ये auction वगैरह हो रहा था, those zamindars who could survive that time, consolidated and strengthened their position. The revenue officials also relaxed the rules of the collection and payment of revenue, which further strengthened the position of the zamindars. It was only during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, that finally the power that was held by the zamindars collapsed, and the new class of the rich peasants, who were the jotedars, they finally emerged and were able to replace the zamindar. Now, all this information that we are discussing, whether it be about the Benami purchases or the auction of the zamindaris, or of the rise of the jotedars, of the state of the zamindars, we get all this information from a document which is called the Fifth Report. Now, in 1813, this report was presented in the British Parliament regarding the administration and the activities of the East India Company in India. It was the fifth of a series of report, and that is why this is its name, literally the Fifth Report. It's a lengthy document. It runs to about 1,002 pages, and of those, 800 pages are just about the appendices that reproduced the petitions of the zamindars and the ryots, the reports and collections from different districts, statistical tables on revenue returns, and notes on the revenue and judicial administration of Bengal and Madras. मिड 1760 से जब इंग्लिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी ने अपना पावर इंडिया में मतलब प्रॉपरली जमा दिया, तब से ही उनकी जो एक्टिविटीज़ पे एक क्लोज watch thi from the British Parliament, because they wanted to see what this company is doing in India, whether it is benefiting Britain as a whole or if it's only mainly benefiting the English East India Company. अब जाहिर सी बात है, the East India Company had a lot of power over the trade that was happening in India and China. In fact, they had a monopoly. There was a royal charter that gave them that monopoly, and many people in Britain were looking forward to take that monopoly away from them so that small business owners could also profit from this economic boom that that Britain gained from the colonization of India and also China. Information about the misadministration and the misrule of the company was hotly debated in Britain, as well as instances of corruption or of personal misadministration on the part of an individual from the company was widely published in the press. The British Parliament passed a series of acts in order to regulate the activities of the company in India, and as a result, the company had to produce a series of reports, of course. The Fifth Report was one such report, and also committees were assigned to closely keep an eye on the workings of the company. The Fifth Report was the basis of many such arguments and debates that happened in the British Parliament regarding the rule of the English East India Company in India. For over a century and a half, the Fifth Report was the basis of a lot of the perception regarding company rule in India. But again, The fifth report is an important document of history. It provides information of that time. But like all official documents, or in previous instances, in the cases of court documents, oftentimes history written by those in power have their own motives. So if I am in power and I am writing about my rule, I would not necessarily write about the bad things that happened. I may write about noticing something that is not to my tastes, or that is not how I want my rule to be and how I'm trying to improve that situation. But I would not willingly put in things that I know were my fault, or that I did wrong. So the fifth report is such a document. It is from the eye of the company, whose primary motive was not to govern the land that they were ruling over. It was to gain as much revenue or
maximum out of the country.
Exactly. So coming back to the fifth report, that also is a report that of course is invaluable for the information that it is providing. But who wrote that report? What were the motives behind that report? We have to look into that as well.
Researchers had done a lot of research when they were writing the history about the rural Bengal, especially जो archives थी and district magistrates के पास जो documents थे उस time के, and often they come to a conclusion that the fifth report had exaggerated the maladministration and the chaos that the company had made in Bengal. So through exaggerated version tha, because according to them not all zamindars lost their lands, and the traditional zamindari थी उसको कोई इतना नुकसान नहीं पहुंचा जितना कि fifth report ने claim किया है, because in many ways the zamindars could retain their land through ingenious ways, like especially when the land was auctioned and their own servants were going and purchasing their land on the behalf of the zamindar. So many a times, like the historians have claimed that the report is slightly exaggerated. The second topic is the hoe and the plow. अब हम बंगाल से निकलकर एक ड्रायर रीजन पे जाएंगे जो कि राजमहल हिल्स है. For this particular topic, they have mentioned about Buchanan's own diary that he maintained when he visited the Rajmahal hills. So he, according to him, the hills were dense. They could not be penetrated as such. People did not venture as much, and it was pretty dangerous. But he did have, with the officials, when he visited this area in the 19th century, he met the people who were the inhabitants, and according to him, they were very shy. They didn't speak to him much. In fact, they also abandoned their areas when they came. So they were very apprehensive. 18th century के records बताते हैं कि the people residing in the Rajmahal hills were known as Pahariyas. They were dependent on the subsistence of these people was on the forest produce. They did shifting agriculture. They would burn the bushes and the crops, as in the trees, and then उस area में वो अपने millets grow करते थे for their own consumption. And because वो ash जो होती थी वो potash में बहुत rich होती थी, तो it helped in the production of millets and other grains. They cultivated the area जो था जिसको वो by burning them, and they would also dig with hoes and they would cultivate, and after some time they would leave this particular patch and they'll move to another patch so that land could retain its fertility. जो Buchanan के जो accounts हैं वो momentary हैं, they are not that long history of that particular place. वो जो moment में उन्होंने देखा, जो perceive किया, वो ही mentioned है. And they depended on the forest produce, and also they would they would grow mahuas on trees. तो mahuas consume करते थे. cocoon से silk बनती थी, raisins भी use करते थे, and they would also exchange with the people, the more settled population. They also used wood for charcoal production. जो undergrowth होता था, जो mat type होता था spread across the forest, and especially जब आप काटोगे या burn करोगे, that was used as the fodder for as the pastures जो थे वो सारे use करते थे for the cattle, they would consume it, and obviously they're consuming and their droppings are also there. Then again it would retain its fertility, the land would retain its fertility.
A very sustainable way of living in a way.
More like it's nature oriented, they lived with the forest, they lived with the nature. As we have already told you, the Pahadiyas they could be the hunter gatherers, they were shifting cultivators, they lived with the nature, right? They lived in hutments and within the tamarind groves, and they would rest under the mango tree. They consider the entire region to be their own. They also resisted the intrusion of outsiders for obvious reasons, because उनका एक cycle है, उनका एक system है जो disturb हो जाएगा. Chief भी होते थे, they would settle disputes, they would create unity amongst the people. They would also have tribal enmity with, the wars with other tribes. So it was a very tribal society. With the base on the hills, the Pahadiyas often indulged in raiding activities. They raided the settled agricultural areas. It was a periodic necessity, because especially at the time of scarcity they would do it, and also in a way to assert their control over the settled agricultural lands. They also this is how they maintained their relationship with the settled agriculture, and the zamindars would always pay a tribute in a way to purchase peace, and the traders would also give some amount to the hill chief in a way, because they were supposed to use certain passes that were within the Rajmahal hills, so uske liye wo tribute pay karte the, and the chief's responsibility was to protect the trader who was carrying his goods to a different place so that it doesn't get plundered. But ये जो पूरा system था ना, वो बहुत fragile था, especially in the during the end period of the 18th century. There was an aggressive system in which a larger areas of the Rajmahal hills were getting converted into agricultural lands, into settled lands, and this was encouraged by the British. So the zamindars and the jotedars were, cutting these hill areas. They were cutting the forest, converting it into settled land, and rice was grown on this particular land. In a way, the British policy was such that a man is superior to nature, and it can plunder it the way he wants it, because he is the superior one, irrespective of any structure that was there in nature. The British encouraged the clearance of forests because they wanted to increase their revenue. Crops would be produced for exportation, to export to a different land, and उनका पैसा बन रहा है, and also in a way कि एक order वो form कर लेंगे by taming the people of Rajmahal hills. And also they saw forest as wild and primitive and unruly. They should be tamed, and the people who were so used to their culture, the culture of living in a forest and consuming forest produce, they were forced to take up plow, and they were forced to give up hunting.
And in a way, forest dwellers or the tribal people were the first inhabitants of the land before the British, before the Mughals or the Sultanates, before the Aryans.
In fact, the Mughals or the Sultanate rulers, they never questioned or they never tried to break that structure, the tribal structure, because and they had that we will give you the produce of the agricultural lands, you give us the
trade used to happen with the forest dwellers.
But the British came with a different agenda altogether.
Because they just wanted profit.
Yeah.
The more you read this chapter, the more you will just start hating colonial the colonial government that we were subjugated to.
As settled agriculture expanded, the area under the forest and the pastures they contracted, and इससे क्या हुआ, जो settled लोग थे और जो पहाड़ियाँ थे उनके बीच में conflict और बढ़ गया. जो उनके raids होते थे वो बढ़ते गई पहाड़ियाँ की. They would attack, they would take away their cattle, their food grains, and the British could not do anything. It was very difficult for them to stop. 1770s में British embarked on a very brutal policy कि we will of extermination. जब भी कोई पहाड़िया पकड़ा जाएगा उसको हम मार देंगे. But in 1780s में under Augustus Cleveland he थोड़ा pacification शुरू हो गया था. He asked the chiefs that we will give you an annual allowance and you have to tame your men. But a lot of our chiefs, they refused these allowances, and the ones who accepted these allowances, they were, in a way, they lost their authority over the people, because उनको लगता था कि इन्होंने हमारे साथ, जो लोगों को लगता था पहाड़ियों को, कि हमारे चीफ ने हमारे साथ गद्दारी की है. And many a times the chiefs who had accepted the allowance, they were perceived as stipendiary chief. Stipend, मतलब गुलाम है ये अंग्रेजों के.
एक तरह से तो बिक गए थे ना,
बिक गए थे,
ईमान बिक गया था.
As the pacification campaign it continued, the Pahadiyas, they went deeper inside the Rajmahal hills. They kind of cut off themselves, and उनका जो resentment था towards the British and जो settlers थे वो बढ़ता चला गया था, because they saw them as a threat to their livelihood. They saw them as a threat to their life. And 1811 में जब Buchanan was visiting this area, so they obviously saw him also as a threat, because they never trusted him, and because how the British behaved with them, and there was this history of repression and aggression towards them, that they could not trust the whites. इसी के साथ साथ एक और मुद्दा शुरू हो गया, जो संथल कम्युनिटी थी वो भी, they kept on clearing the pastures and the forest for cultivation of rice and cotton, and especially the lower area of the Rajmahal Hills was, the Santhals occupied. इससे और भी जो पहाड़ियाँ थे, they kept moving deeper into the Rajmahal Hills, and and obviously Santhal अब पहाड़ियाँ के बीच में भी enmity शुरू हो गई, because पहाड़ियाँ were they represented the hoe and the Santhals represented the power of plough. 1810 में Buchanan, he crossed the Ganjuria Pahad of the Rajmahal Hills. Region having been transformed through proper application of human labor, he wrote, Ganjuria is just sufficiently cultivated to show what a glorious country this might be made. I think its beauty and riches might be equal to almost any in the universe. Buchanan also says that the Santhals had, occupied the lower part of the Rajmahal Hills. They settled down and they got into cultivation. Santhal entered Bengal somewhere in the 1780s. Zamindars used them for cultivation purposes, and later on the British used them to displace the Pahadiyas. Pahadiyas refused to touch the hoe to wipe out the forest, whereas Santhals depended on plough, and they vigorously wiped off the forest and got into settlement.
Now, the Santhals were given land at the foot of the Rajmahal Hills. The land that was demarcated as that of the Santhals was called the Damini Ko. Now, the Santhals were supposed to live in this land. They were supposed to clear the forests. They were supposed to cultivate the land, and they were supposed to give a part of the revenue to the officials. Now, this land was surveyed and mapped, and pillar posts were demarcated along the borders, and they were supposed to live on that land, practice plough agriculture, and become settled peasants. Now, the land grant that was stipulating that the Santhals were supposed to occupy this land that was demarcated for them, the Damini Ko. They were supposed to clear 1/10 of the stipulated land within the first 10 years of occupying it. Now, once this land was handed over to the Santhals, their settlement increased drastically. If there were 40 villages by 1838, by 1851, this number had risen to 1,473 villages. And similarly, the population had also grown significantly, and this also meant that the revenue had grown manyfold, and the company was benefiting of the Santhal settling in the Rajmahal Hills. or at the foot of the Rajmahal Hills. Santhal myths and songs from the 19th century talk about a long, tireless and continuous history of a kind of restlessness. एक बेचैनी थी उनके अंदर. They were looking to settle and they were not able to settle for centuries and for generations, and finally their search seemed to have ended when they were given the Damini Ko, and that is where they flourished. Now, but because the most fertile lands of the Rajmahal Hills fell inside the Damini Ko, which was the land that was given to the Santals, the Paharias could not really sustain their mode of life. Now, because the most fertile lands on the lower part of the Rajmahal Hills were being occupied by the Santals, the Paharias were driven further north to the more barren lands where agriculture could not really take place. Nothing would grow there. And initially they did resist. There were skirmishes or fights between the Paharias and the Santals, but then eventually they had to retreat further deep into the forest or further north, where they could not really practice shifting agriculture, because shifting agriculture में आप एक जगह से move करते हैं दूसरी जगह तक, but then that privilege was taken away from them because they were restricted within that barren land. Further, when the forests were being cut and the forest lands were being converted to pastures and agricultural lands, the hunters could not hunt because the forest where they would hunt was no longer there. So they could not sustain their life, and that affected them, and it was difficult for them to survive. By contrast, the Santals, who also were moving from place to place, they adapted to the new situation and they were able to flourish. But even this rest that the Santals seem to have won after centuries or after generations of struggle could not last long. As soon as the agriculture was doing well, as soon as they were providing good revenue to the company, they were being taxed more. And because they were being taxed more, they had to they had to lend money from money lenders, who were also called dikhus locally. And when they were not able to pay back the sum, the land was then taken over by the money lenders, and then the zamindars were also harassing them in a way. And so the peace that they seem to have won after a very long period of struggle was again slipping away from their fingers. 1832 में the Damini Ko was handed over to the Santals, but by the 1850s, the Santals felt that what was happening to them, what was the behavior that was met to them by money lenders who would charge them very high rates of interest, to the zamindars who would try to capture their lands, and even the colonial state who would or the company state who would try to levy really high taxes. They felt that they had to now take back the land that was given to them, or the land that they got after a long period of struggle, and finally live the life that they would want to live, that they would be proud of living, or a life where they would not be मतलब किसी के you're not living on behalf of anybody, like you're not answerable to somebody. So they wanted to take back their power in a way. They wanted to create an ideal world for themselves, and this is what led to the Santhal revolt, which happened between 1855 to 1856, and it was after this revolt when the Santhal Pargana was formed. Now this Pargana carved out 5,500 square miles from the districts of Bhagalpur and Birbhum, and the colonial state sort of hoped that in providing them with this land, they would buy peace in a way, or that it would try to subdue the revolt that had happened. Section के beginning में हमने बात की how Buchanan had presented an image of the Paharias and what his account was about. In the book also you will read it. But when we talk about the account of Buchanan, we have to keep in mind that this guy did not randomly travel to, parts of the subcontinent on his whim or for the love of the unexplored or undiscovered terrain, or because he really loved the landscapes. ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. He was on the company's payroll. He was an employee of the East India Company that would send out not just Buchanan but many people like that to go and survey the land. So geographers and physicians and medicine men, they were all various employees of the company would go out and they would survey the land and they would carefully note down what they saw, and this was expected of them from the company. And even when Buchanan traveled, it's not like when you think about traveling today, you think about people just packing a backpack and going out into the wilderness to explore. But when Buchanan was traveling, he was not alone. He had an army of people with him, ranging from palanquin bearers to people who would supply the water, people who would cook for him, and people who would prepare his residences, and who would look after his residences. And so there was really मतलब बारात जाती थी in a way Buchanan के साथ, and he was expected to note down things, note down specific instances or specific features of a land, of the people, and he was supposed to report them back to the company. And whenever people saw him, whenever people experienced Buchanan and his mandli of travelers with him, they saw him or they perceived him as an extension of the Sarkar, and rightly so. He was obsessive in what he observed, what minerals were available, what were the practices. अगर आप iron ore को mine कर रहे हैं तो उसकी practices क्या है, अगर आप salt देख रहे हैं तो उसके practices क्या हैं. So he was a very keen observer. He wanted to see what is available, where it is available, how it is available,
how it can benefit the company,
how it can benefit the company, what are the local practices, can they be improved upon, can the company learn something from these practices. So those were the things that his accounts are providing to the company. जैसे जैसे ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी का जो स्फीयर ऑफ इन्फ्लुएंस था वो बढ़ता गया, they employed more people to go and survey lands, to survey natural resources. Because see, again, East India Company, and by extension the British rule in India, which was a colonial rule in India, and it's true for all colonies, they don't really care about the well-being of the land that they are colonizing, of the people that they're colonizing. They only care about profit because they want to serve their own nation. Their loyalty is with their own nation. So it did not matter to them what they were doing to the land, to the people. They only wanted to gain profit.
They never came here to settle down as per se.
Exactly.
They just wanted to extract the maximum out of their colonies and send it to the mother country.
Exactly. And not just India. There were many countries. Africa le lo, other Asian countries le lo. All of them have experienced colonization to their brutal limits, and we have also. And so they would have people survey the land, survey what ores were getting, what natural resources were available, what type of plants could be cultivated. And so Buchanan also played a very important role. And if we recall the quote back when he was talking about the Rajmahal Hills, it's not what he saw, but also what could be made of that land. If there is forest, okay, this land can be, utilized as pasture land, or it could be, used as an agricultural field, or these type of crops can be grown there. Because again, profit was the main motive. So that is something that we have to keep in mind when we are looking at his account as well. The way that he perceives things are generally from a company lens, not just from, of course, we do get good records of what he saw, what the land was like at that moment in time. But there is always a motive behind what he recorded.
Third topic is the revolt in the countryside the Bombay Deccan. As we have already seen, बंगाल में क्या सिचुएशन थी, ज़मींदार की क्या सिचुएशन थी, जोतेदार आए, फिर हम राजमहल हिल्स की तरफ जाते हैं जहाँ पहाड़ियाज थे, उनकी क्या उन्होंने प्रॉब्लम्स झेली, संथल्स आए फिर, और संथल्स ने क्या प्रॉब्लम्स झेली. अब हम थोड़े वेस्टर्न साइड ऑफ द सब कॉन्टिनेंट की तरफ जाएंगे. वील गो टुवर्ड्स द डेक्कन. एंड उस समय बहुत रिवोल्ट्स हो रहे थे, पेजेंट रिवोल्ट्स हो रहे थे, काफ़ी रिवोल्ट्स चल रहे थे. क्यों हुए रिवोल्ट्स, व्हाट वाज द रीज़न, व्हाट वाज द एंगर, कुछ उनको इनजस्टिस सा लगा. देयर वर लेयर्स ऑफ एंगर बीनीथ देम. एंड सो द कंपनी का पॉलिसी ये थी कि व्हाट इज़ द इशू, क्या इशू है, वी शुड सी लुक इनटू इट, फॉर्मुलेट पॉलिसीज टू टैकल इट. और एक सच इशू हुआ था जब 19th सेंचुरी में मनी लेंडर्स और ग्रेन डीलर्स के खिलाफ पेजेंट्स खड़े हुए थे, एंड स्पेशली इन द डेक्कन in 1875. जो ये मूवमेंट था 1875 का, it started from a village called Supa in Pune, and it was the place where all the money lenders and shopkeepers resided. So the peasants of the ryots from the neighboring villages and the village of Supa, they came and उन्होंने जितने भी साहूकार थे उनको घेर लिया, and they demanded that they give them the bahi khata, जो खाते होते थे और debt bonds होते थे, and those khatas were burnt. They looted the grains, and साथ ही साथ में साहूकार के घर भी जला दिए गए थे. ये जो आंदोलन रिबेलियन था वो स्प्रेड हुआ इन द नेक्स्ट 2 months में 6500 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर के रेंज में, और साथ ही साथ पूना के सुपा डिस्ट्रिक्ट विलेज से अहमदनगर तक स्प्रेड हुआ, एंड कियोस मच गया था. साहूकार्स हैड फ्लेड देयर विलेजेस, दे हैड लेफ्ट देयर प्रॉपर्टीज एंड बिलोंगिंग्स बिहाइंड. व्हेन द ब्रिटिश ऑफिशियल दे सॉ दिस, दे हैड ordered the police to they retained police in these villages to scare the rebellions. 951 of them were arrested, some were convicted, but it took a lot of time for the British to control this rebellion. Slowly from Bengal, the British expanded their company, their rule, and नए इन्होंने रेवेन्यू सेटलमेंट्स शुरू कर दिए थे, फॉर्मुलेट करना डिफरेंट रीजन में. Permanent settlement was only limited to Bengal, Odisha area, because जब एग्रीकल्चर के रेट्स इंक्रीज हुए, हार्वेस्ट इंक्रीज हुआ, वैल्यू इंक्रीज हुई, तो वो जो सरप्लस था वो बंगाली ज़मींदार के उसमें जा रहा था. अब बिकॉज परमानेंट सेटलमेंट was settled at was fixed, they could not get the surplus. So they had thought कि we need to have revenue settlements, but not permanently. The settlement that we could revive or revise it whenever there was a need. So 1820s में they were really influenced by the policies of a gentleman called David Ricardo, or he belonged to England, and इनकी जो economic policies थी, according to him कि अगर जो cultivator है he should only have claim to the average rent. अगर जो आप लेवी करते हो उससे ज़्यादा होता है, जो उसमें हार्वेस्ट है उसकी वैल्यूज़ एवरेज रेंट से ज़्यादा होगी, वो जो सरप्लस होगा वो टैक्स कर दिया जाएगा. अगर वो टैक्स नहीं हो पाता है तो जो कल्टीवेटर है वो रेंटियर बन जाएगा, और he would utilize that surplus in improving the quality of his land. इससे क्या हुआ, ज़मींदार became the rentier of their own land. They were living on rental homes, and then the British thought of revising or settling a new revenue settlement here. And उससे क्या होगा, they introduced the Ryotwari settlement in the Deccan, where the revenue settlement was not fixed with the zamindar but with the ryot. The average income from different types of soil was estimated, the revenue paying capacity of the ryot was assessed, and a proportion of it fixed as the share of the state. The lands were resurveyed every 30 years and the revenue rates increased. Therefore, the revenue demand was no longer permanent. जो first revenue settlement था वो 1820 में था, but it was so high that the peasant found it they were unable to pay the revenue because it was so high. They fled their villages to a newer place, and money lenders also they exploited them, and साथ ही साथ जो collectors होते थे, they were also very strict with them. They through various means they wanted to extract the revenue. By chance a peasant was not able to pay the revenue, his crops were seized, the whole village came under debt, and the whole village had to face the fury. Fine was also imposed. So things were very stringent, they were very difficult for the peasantry. जो ये रॉथवारी settlement जो इन्होंने settlement किया था ब्रिटिशर्स ने. Another reason was soil quality poor होती थी, fluctuating rainfalls होते थे. इससे और भी जो agriculture prices है वो गिर गए. Obviously उसकी वजह से peasantry तो और decline में चली जाएगी. Then between 1832 to 34 famine हो गया. 1/3 of the cattle was killed in Deccan. Half of the population died because of this. People did not have their stocks with them, to sustain themselves. And साथ ही साथ में unpaid balances of revenue भी increase होते गए. इतना कुछ कि they started taking money from the money lenders, but they were unable to pay them. वो भी ड्यू बढ़ता चला गया. साथ ही साथ में हर एक एवरीडे नीड के लिए उनको मनी लेंडर्स के पास जाना पड़ता था. एंड दिस वाज अ वेरी अलार्मिंग सिचुएशन. ब्रिटिश ऑफिशियल दे सॉ दिस कि जो इंडेटनेस है पेजेंट्री की वो बढ़ती चली जा रही है. बट थोड़ा साइट ऑफ रिलीफ था इन 1840s जब थोड़ी इकोनॉमिक रिकवरी हुई. द ब्रिटिश रियलाइज कि जो इन्होंने रॉथवारी सेटलमेंट जिस प्राइस पे फिक्स किया था वो बहुत हाई था. दे मॉडरेटेड दैट इन अ वे हेल्प द पेजेंट्री टू इंक्रीज मोर लैंड, convert more land into agricultural land. Pasture lands were converted into cultivable lands. And थोड़ा steady हुई situations. Prices भी increase हुई, agriculture prices increase हुई. But still the peasantry needed money to buy cattle, to buy seeds and land. उसके लिए फिर उनको money lenders की तरफ जाना पड़ गया था.
1860s में India saw a cotton boom. But before the 1860s, there was this nervousness in Britain about their sources of cotton. By 1857, the Cotton Supply Association was formed, and by 1859, the Manchester Cotton Company was formed. और इनका primary objective ये था कि दुनिया भर में कॉटन उगाना है जहाँ पे भी उसको उगा सकते हैं. And India met the criteria very well because India में एक तो the land was very favorable. The climate was very conducive to growing cotton, and the labor was exceptionally cheap. And the worries of the British cotton manufacturers was proved in 1861 when the American Civil War broke out. And एक time पे 3/4 of the cotton imports that Britain imported came from America. अगर 1861 में nearly 2 million bales या फिर 20 lakh bales जिसमें each bale weighed 400 pounds that was being imported. By the next year, the imports fell down to just 55,000 bales. When this happened, frantic messages were sent across all colonies to increase the cotton production, and similar things were received in India, where the cotton manufacturers or the cotton people who would trade in cotton started visiting villages trying to see how the production can be increased. Because there was a demand in the market, the price of cotton soared. And export merchants were also very willing to give out loans to the local sahukars, who would in turn give loans out to the local money lenders, who would give them out to the peasants, to increase the production of cotton in order to meet the demands of the British. जब market में boom होता है, when there is a demand, a steady demand in the market, the credit flows freely. So the money lender does not worry about अरे पैसा मिलेगा वापस कब मिलेगा. He does not impose restrictions which he would usually do because demand है चीज़ की, तो वो भी खुले हाथ से अपना पैसे लेंड करते थे. और इसी डेवलपमेंट का इम्पैक्ट आपको डेक्कन कंट्री साइड में भी मिलेगा, जहाँ पे द रियट्स वुड गेट अ लोन ऑफ ₹100 फॉर एवरी acre of land that they planted with cotton, and even long term loans were being granted to them fairly easily. जब तक अमेरिकन सिविल वॉर चल रहा था तब तक इंडिया ने अमेजिंग कॉटन बूम देखा, एंड बाय 1862, nearly 90% of the imports in Britain were being sent from India. लेकिन just because cotton का boom हो रहा था इंडिया में did not mean that every peasant was benefiting out of this new thing or this increase in production. While there were rich peasants that of course did benefit from them, the vast majority of the peasants did not. उल्टा वो और debt में गिरते रहे. और जब तक ये boom था तब तक credit was also flowing easily. In fact, 1861 में Bombay Gazette had put out this article where it was saying, you know, what stops India from replacing America completely for cotton, roughly along those lines. And but these ambitions or these dreams were short-lived. By 1865, as the Civil War ended, the cotton imports started being imported from America once again, and वहाँ से जब increase होने लगा तो फिर जो Indian export था cotton का वो भी steadily decline होने लगा. और जब Indian export steadily decline होने लगा तो फिर the sahukars, who were the money lenders who would be lending money to the ryots, they also started closing up their accounts, and they stopped lending money to the peasants and the ryots, and then they started asking for the repayment of the debt कि अभी आपने इतने सारे पैसे हमसे लिए थे, अब चलो वापस करो. एक तरफ हम देखते हैं कि जो क्रेडिट सिस्टम था उन्होंने अपना खाता बंद कर दिया, और दूसरी तरफ जो रेवेन्यू असेसमेंट था वो भी स्टेडली इंक्रीज होने लगा. नाउ द फर्स्ट असेसमेंट हैपेंड ड्यूरिंग द 1820s और द 1830s, एंड नाउ इट वाज टाइम फॉर द रीअसेसमेंट. और जब रीअसेसमेंट हुआ तो उन्होंने फिर से रेवेन्यू को इतना हाई रखा कि it was just not possible for somebody to be able to meet those demands, especially a peasant or a ryot who was already under so much debt. और ऐसा भी नहीं था कि जो revenue का increment था it was of an acceptable amount, या तो 5, 10, 15%, चलो 20% लगा लो. From 50% it jumped straight to 100%. So the ryot had no means to, he could not meet those demands at all. And when he turned to the local sahukar to help him out in his time of distress, they also had closed up their books and they said, okay, you know what, we are not giving you any more money, but you need to pay up. Yeah. So now he had to pay to the local sahukar who अब लोकल जो आपका बंदा होता है वो तो आपका अपना होता है, बट यहाँ पे इट वाज लाइक वो भी अपना नहीं है, और now you have to pay money or to the colonial government as well. So he was getting pressured from both ends. The refusal of the money lenders to lend money to the ryot enraged them. सिर्फ इसीलिए नहीं कि मनी लेंडर मनी लेंड नहीं कर रहे थे, बट इन अ वे the ryot was just getting into debt, deeper and deeper into debt, and he was already dependent on the moneylender for his survival. On top of that, it was felt that the moneylender was being insensitive to the plight of the ryots, and that they were violating the local customary norms of the countryside. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि मनी लेंडर्स आपको सिर्फ कॉलोनियल गवर्नमेंट के अंदर ही मिले थे और यहीं पे मतलब उनका बर्थ हुआ था, एंड that's not the case. Money lenders were there before the British colonial government. Money lenders have existed after independence as well. But British colonial rule के पहले there were a variety of customary rules that were in place that would regulate the actions of the money lender. Now, one such rule was that the amount credited or the debt that one had incurred could not be more than the principal amount. तो जैसे अगर मैंने आपसे 100 रुपये उधार लिए हैं तो इंटरेस्ट के बाद आप मेरे को 1000 रुपये नहीं मांग सकते इंटरेस्ट ऐड करते करते. So that was a primary rule that was in place, which was meant to check the money lender and to keep him from not कि वो फ़ायदा ना उठाए लोगों का. बट कॉलोनियल रूल के अंदर ये जो कस्टमरी रूल्स थे दैट कम्प्लीटली ब्रोक. There were many cases that were seen by the Deccan Rights Commission, and in one such case, an interest of 2,000 was being exacted for a principal sum of 100 rupees.
Oh God.
And in today's term, 100 rupees is not that big a deal, but उस टाइम पे 100 was मतलब लाख जितना अगर आप बोले, और उसके ऊपर अगर आपको 2,000 का इंटरेस्ट और देना है, तो दैट a person, a regular person or a normal ryot or even a peasant could not even fathom to be able to pay that amount of money. 1859 में legislation was passed in which the colonial government tried to limit the power of the money lender, and what the limitation law sort of said was that any debt that was that had been due for over 3 years, वो automatically ही माफ हो जाएगा. So you were not going to collect the principal or the credit from that amount if 3 years had passed. But over time, the ryots had started seeing the sahukar as a deceitful man, somebody who could not be trusted, and this was proven to be true. So in case of the limitation law, what the sahukars started to do was that they would make the ryot or the peasant sign a new deed every 3 years, and the money that should have been forgiven or the amount that should have collapsed at the end of the 3 years, he would add that afresh. And so वो करते 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 इतना लार्ज सम अक्यूमुलेट हो जाता था कि बंदा सोच भी नहीं सकता था कि मैं उसको कैसे चुकाऊं.
और फिर जब वो मर जाए तो उसकी फैमिली पे आ जाता था.
Which is something that is still there.
हाँ, वो सिलसिला बस चलता ही रहता था.
In petitions that the Deccan Riots Committee had collected, there were more devious ways in which were highlighted, wherein the sahukar would in a way वो फंसा देते थे रियॉत को या फिर पेजेंट को. एक तो ये था कि वो जो accumulated principal था and the accumulated debt था, that would get carried on to the new credit every 3 years. But on top of that, अगर आपने लोन चुका भी दिया होता तो आपको वो receipts नहीं देते थे. अगर वो आप पेजेंट से अनाज लेते थे तो they would not pay the amount that was guaranteed, but they would always pay lesser than that, and they would try to take the land away from the peasants in a way कि अच्छा तुम चुका नहीं पाए हो तो अब तुम्हारी ज़मीन मेरी हुई. So that is something that they would try to do.
Today.
The deeds and the bonds that the sahukars made the ryots or the peasants sign came to be seen as new tools of oppression. पहले deeds and bonds, they were very rare. आपकी ज़बान बहुत ही मायने रखती थी. अभी भी जब हम किसी से बात करते हैं तो हम बोलते हैं ज़बान दो, है ना. So that was something that was एक वो चला आ रहा था. For the British, if the deed did not if it could not be enforced by law, it had no value. So that is also something, because they required something of a written form. The sahukars also took that and manipulated it when it was used against the ryot or the peasant, because oftentimes the information was not wholly disclosed to them. So वो बस उनकी छाप ले लेते थे या फिर उनकी साइन ले लेते थे, and they would not be privy to what they signed. एक तरह का डर बैठ गया था against the written word, because they had no idea of what they were signing, what the money lender was putting in to say कि अगर यहाँ से यहाँ तक ये वाला काम नहीं हुआ तो फिर आपको ये भरपाई करनी पड़ेगी. उनको इसका कोई आइडिया नहीं था. And so there was a growing mistrust towards the written word, towards the sahukars, but also in a way they were helpless because they were still dependent on it. Yeah. So even if they did not want to sign a bond, they had to sign a bond because पैसे की ज़रूरत थी.
The last topic is Deccan Riot Commission. तो जब रिवोल्ट फैला था 1875 का, तो द गवर्नमेंट ऑफ बॉम्बे was not taking it very seriously, but the government of India, जो colonial government of India था, उनको ये बहुत बात सीरियस लगी, and they asked the government of Bombay to look into it, to look into the reason for the riot, right? तो एक कमीशन फॉर्म किया हुआ था एंड वो प्रेजेंट किया गया था 1878 में टू द ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट. इसको डेक्कन राइट रिपोर्ट बोलते हैं. It's actually a good source for the historians, because the historians through this they could read up what the riots said, what the Sahukar said, मनी लेंडर्स की क्या वो थी, आई विटनेसेस अकाउंट्स भी हैं इसके अंदर, रेवेन्यू क्या था, और भी चीज़ें जो उस टाइम पे वो जो सिचुएशन थी वो सारी रिपोर्ट के तौर पर बनी हुई हैं, विच इज़ हेल्पफुल फॉर द फ्यूचर. बट हमको ये ध्यान रखना है कि ये रिकॉर्ड्स जब हम पढ़ रहे हैं, यू हैव टू बी वेरी केयरफुल कि क्योंकि कौन लिख रहा है. तो ये जो रिकॉर्ड है वो ऑब्वियसली जो British officials and they are writing, and they will not blame themselves. So in the record they are not blaming the British government, they are blaming the money lenders for the chaos and the riots that took place in Bombay, in the Deccan in 1875. So we have to be very careful when we are referring to such sources, बिकॉज आपको हर एक सिचुएशन, हर एक साइड को परखना पड़ता है, क्योंकि जो पार में है वो तो अपने आप को बचाने की ही कोशिश करेगा, वो अपने आप को ब्लेम नहीं करेगा. बट अगर आप सिचुएशन को लार्जर उसमें पर्सपेक्टिव से देखेंगे तो और भी चीज़ें पता चलती हैं. इन दिस चैप्टर वी got to know about how when the British came to the subcontinent and they were अपने जब वो पाँव जमा रहे थे तो उनकी लैंड रेवेन्यू सिचुएशन क्या थी बंगाल में, फिर how they dealt with the people who depended on the forest produce, जो कि पहाड़ियास थे, and फिर संथल रेवोल्यूशन कैसे हुआ, and जो डेक्कन में राइट्स थे वो उसकी सिचुएशन क्या थी. And I hope that you have liked today's episode, and please read the chapters very carefully if by chance we have missed out on something. Like, share and subscribe, and keep watching Tariq.